basis. It was passed under President Clinton, the first President Clinton. It was so this was in the mid 1990s, and so we moved to a different welfare system than we had before. Now, interestingly, Ron Haskins has written a new book. Just finished it. Just came out a few months ago. It's called Moneyball for Government. Now, Moneyball, the term Moneyball comes from a strategy for baseball teams. Familiar with the American sport, baseball? Well, in recent years, baseball has become more scientific. There was a movie about this, maybe you saw it. Baseball has become more scientific with measures used to make decisions about which players to promote and what strategies to take during games. So it's the use of research evidence to be a successful baseball team. So Ron Haskins has now written about Moneyball for government. And this is about using research evidence to make good decisions in government. And he identifies 6 programs within the Obama administration that have promoted the use of research evidence. And this is quite startling for Ron Haskins because he's a Republican. And yet, he's identified these 6 programs in the Democrat administration, in the Obama administration, to show that research evidence can make a difference. One of these efforts is in the field of education. So this is the one I know the best. It's called Investing in Innovation. It's known as I3. And it started as a huge research and program funding during the recovery from the economic crisis of 2008. It was part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARRA. And it awarded funds to implement a program and conduct rigorous research. And you could get more funds if there was more rigorous research supporting your effort. So you could get a big grant, up to $50 million, if you had strong evidence from randomized trials to demonstrate the effectiveness of your program. And there were 4 winners of the original $50 million grant, and these are some of the best-known education innovations and the most widely tested education innovations in the United States. One is called Success for All. It's a restructuring program for elementary schools. The second is Teach for America, which is a program that takes the best and brightest college students and places them in schools where there are high needs for teachers, but without having teacher certification. The third is KIPP Academies, which is a charter school movement that is very rigorous and has many long hours of schooling and has been very demanding and has shown success. And the fourth is Reading Recovery, which is a one-on-one tutoring program developed in New Zealand, and it is the program with the most demonstrated success for helping struggling students catch up to their peers. So those were the most rigorously supported. They got the big grants, but then the second tier is called validation, and these were programs with some rigorous evidence, but not as much. I was able to get one of these validation grants, not at the original $30 million. I didn't get that award, but I got one later when the money was down to $15 million. Still a very big grant. And my study was to support a program called Families and Schools Together, which is the family engagement program that I mentioned earlier. And then the lowest level is called development, where you had a good idea and some evidence to support your success, but not rigorous evidence. So you got less money, you had to develop the program and then provide a rigorous test. The key element in all 3 of these tiers was that there had to be a rigorous third-party evaluation, meaning an external independent evaluation to judge the effectiveness. So Haskins describes 6 of these different programs. I'll mention just one other, which I think is one of the 6 he mentions, but I don't remember for sure. Anyway, but I mentioned it earlier. It's the Nurse-Family Partnership Program to promote healthy parenting. Now, there's a program called the Nurse-Family Partnership that had rigorous evidence of success, and it leads to greater health of children. So the Obama administration wanted to include it in the Affordable Care Act. But then there was a lot of political pressure to include other kinds of programs. People were jealous. Why is that program in and my program isn't? So eventually they decided to include any research-tested family education program. But nonetheless, it is a successful example of using research and making political decisions based on the research. One more example, a failure example. This is about class size reduction. So in the 1980s, the state of Tennessee did a randomized evaluation, a statewide evaluation on class size reduction. It's known as the STAR project, Student-Teacher Achievement Ratio. And Project STAR had 3 conditions: no change, smaller classes where the average class size moved from 22 students to 17 students, and regular sized classes but with a teacher aide. And the results of this randomized study provided strong support for smaller classes in kindergarten, first, and second grade. Beyond that, it didn't make a difference, but it did make a difference in those early grades, and the benefits that appeared in the early grades were sustained all through elementary and middle school. So other states said, this seems like a good program, we should adopt it. For example, the state of California mandated smaller classes all across the state, but they did not see the same effects as Project STAR. Why not? Well, implementation, implementation, implementation. In California, they didn't have enough teachers. You know, if you have smaller classes, you need more teachers, right? Well, they didn't have enough teachers to fill the additional classes. So they lowered the quality of teachers. So while smaller classes was helpful, lower quality of teachers was not helpful. In addition, they didn't have the space to put the larger number of classes. So they had classes in closets and in caravans instead of in regular classrooms. So they didn't get the benefits from class size reduction. So the lesson there is that, you know, it's not just a program, it's how it's implemented and the context in which it's implemented. But those are some examples. A more systematic answer to your question might look to the research we've supported on understanding how research evidence is used. And I'll recommend 2 things. One is to look at our website, especially if you look at our focus areas and then look at use of research evidence, you'll find a lot of resources, including many papers about this. And the second is a book called The Use of Research Evidence in Education, which is an edited book edited by Kara Finnegan and Alan Daly. And this edited book, Use of Research Evidence in Education, contains a number of chapters by our grantees that help us understand how research evidence is used in education. Unfortunately, most of the examples are about the barriers to the use of research evidence. So what we hope in the future is we'll know more about how to remove the barriers. So we're working on it.
Human Rights for School project. There is a big discussion in Czech Republic about inclusive education. We've got a few data about benefits from fighting the inequality for the children and families from social disadvantaged background, and also the benefits for the society. But I think these arguments doesn't really work in changing the political or public view, and I think it could help if we've got some argument what benefits get from inclusive schools the white children, the children from majority. The question is, I would like to ask you if you've got some experience how to change the public view, or if you supported some researchers on this topic.
So the term inclusive education has been used in a variety of ways. Sometimes it means including including children with special needs in the regular classroom. Sometimes it refers to including people from different socioeconomic or ethnic and racial backgrounds in the same school. Sometimes it refers to including students with widely varying abilities or heterogeneous abilities within the same classroom instead of tracking students at different performance levels into different classrooms. Could you say more about what you mean by inclusive education?
Yeah, that's it.
So you mean all three of those?
Yeah, all children are included.
Okay, so you know, in the United States, there have been many efforts to try to reduce the use of tracking and create more heterogeneous classes. And one of the most important writers on this topic is someone named Jeannie Oakes. And she has written about 3 barriers to detracking: political, normative, and technical. And the political barrier is that some people have interests in preserving the tracking system, like parents of high-achieving children or teachers who like teaching the high achievers. So that's a barrier. Then there are normative barriers. We believe that people differ from one another, so it seems normal, regular, usual to separate them for instruction. And then there are the technical barriers. It's harder for teachers to teach students of widely varying abilities. My focus has been on the technical barriers. How do we accomplish more successful teaching with a wider variety of students? It's not easy for teachers to instruct students with varying levels of prior performance all together in the same classroom, and teachers need better tools to be successful. And I've maintained that if we could demonstrate the effectiveness of inclusive education, or at least demonstrate that children from low ability backgrounds benefit while children from high ability backgrounds do not suffer, that we would be in better position to overcome the political and normative barriers to detracking. Now, with respect to inclusive education as socially, economically, or ethnically integrative, this is a long-standing debate in the United States. And at the present time, most of the emphasis is not on integration. It's on providing similar or compensatory resources to help children from disadvantaged backgrounds succeed. But there are people who are calling for socioeconomic integration. People arguing that we need to mix students from different social class backgrounds in the same school. And I think that argument may be very similar to the one you're making. A leader in this argument is the Century Foundation, which is a New York City-based foundation that has, or I guess they have offices in Washington and New York City. Anyway, an organization that has long promoted equal opportunity, and their current view is that socioeconomic integration will help to do this. A final response to your question comes from research on social studies or civics classes. I have a colleague named Diana Hess who has studied the value of discussions of controversies in social studies classrooms. And her argument would be that in a more inclusive classroom, you can have richer discussions of controversial issues. So this would be another argument in favor of inclusive education.
So changing mindset starts very earlier. We have to start with school, not with the adults already. Next question, we could still have 1 or 2 or 3.
My question is at the University of Economics in Prague. I would like to ask you about newly adopted affordable healthcare law, whether you believe that has been proved that it works in the direction of reducing inequality in American
I missed what you said. Whether what works?
Which law? We didn't hear it.
Obamacare.
Oh, whether Obamacare works? Okay. So I am not an expert on this. I'm not a healthcare researcher. But nonetheless, I have an opinion. And I have some evidence. First, I'd like to tell you a story. And then I'll tell you my opinion. Okay? The story is how Obamacare saved my son from bankruptcy. Now, prior to Obamacare, a child could stay on the insurance, well, prior to Obamacare, to get health insurance, you had to have a job that provided health insurance. If you didn't have a job that provided health insurance, no health insurance. Unless you were very, very poor, and then there was something called Medicaid that you could get. But you had to be very, very, oh, and you also had to have children to get Medicaid. Otherwise, no Medicaid, no employer-based coverage, no health insurance. So it used to be the case that a child could stay on his parents' health insurance up until age 18 or up until age 22, only if he or she were a full-time student. Beyond that, either you had health insurance on your own or you had no health coverage. So remember, this is a story. So it's a story about my son, Daniel. And when Daniel was 25, he left his job where he got health insurance and took a new job where he did not get health insurance. Why? Because he moved from Wisconsin, where many small businesses provide health insurance, to Texas, where almost no small businesses provide health insurance. So Daniel had no health coverage, 25 years old. Prior to Obamacare, no health coverage. But because of Obamacare, one of the big changes was that young people can stay on their parents' insurance until age 26, no matter what they're doing, whether they're students or not students. So when Daniel moved from Wisconsin to Texas, we got him on our health insurance. That was 9